So, Keith Hill, appointed manager at Bolton Wanderers at the weekend, reunited with David Flitcroft, and I guess it just feels like destiny this. Two Bolton lads now in charge of Bolton Wanderers. This felt like it could have been a possibility at any point in the last, 10 years. But there's an irony in the fact that both as managers have probably never been at a lower ebb than they have been in the last 6 months. Hill was really struggling at Rochdale after years of, hugely overachieving with the club. And it all kind of went a little bit sour towards the end. He started to pick up on some bad vibes from the fans. The expectations had risen. He wasn't necessarily happy with it. And the lack of respect he was getting sometimes, and then he kind of just lost his way. He wasn't really having the control over performances and results he would have liked. They were in the midst of a second successive relegation battle last season, and I feel like Rochdale lost their identity a little bit. They came up, they used to play a hell of a lot of youngsters, and they'd sold off a lot of good players, a lot of young players that the club had developed, they'd sold off. And I guess there's only so long that you can really keep, producing on that conveyor belt before it eventually dries up, and the talent that comes through, it is of lesser quality than what was originally brought through. And in the middle of last season, he was almost quite rudderless, Hill. I think the departure of Chairman Chris Dunphy affected him. He seemed really down in the middle of the season, and it was notable that Rochdale took 3 real hammerings over the Christmas period after Dunphy announced that he'd be leaving the club. I think they were beaten 4-0, 5-0 and 4-0 on the spin. And it just looked like there was no way back for Hill at that stage. He did manage to stick around another 5 or 6 weeks, but it was no real surprise in the end that he would depart the club. And as for Flitcroft, he failed quite badly really with Mansfield last season. They were arguably the best team in League Two according to the performance data. In really good position to get promoted virtually throughout the season. And then just completely bailed at the end. I think there's 3 defeats on the bounce at the end of the season. They lost away at Oldham. At home to Stevenage was a terrible result. And then that final day decider at MK Dons, 88 minutes trailing, couldn't get back into the game, and then went out in the playoffs to Newport on penalties. Again, no real surprise that he was dismissed on the back of that. The promotion was theirs to lose. Somehow managed to lose it twice. And Flitcroft's in a period in his career now where you was beginning to wonder, okay, where's his next job going to be? As a manager. So now he's back together with Hill, and there's an irony that they now land the Bolton Wanderers job because of the position that Bolton Wanderers find themselves in, with a points deduction, relegation to League Two looking more than likely, which is. This is the ballpark where Hill and Flitcroft have got vast experience. If they get relegation, they've shown that they can come back from relegation, or that they can win promotions from League Two. Both done it separately, as well as together with Rochdale, and they are, in terms of track record and the position that Bolton are in right now, they've more than got the credentials for this job. In terms of where Bolton are at, you're wondering where they would be shopping for managers. You can't think of a better appointment than 2 Bolton lads who really know the level, who have got a track record for working with youth and developing young players, given that Bolton have been so reliant on young players lately. My only slight reservation, I suppose, is that clearly the deadline day business means that they're not going to be relying too heavily on those young players. And I think the more that Hill was doing business at Rochdale and bringing in seasoned campaigners, the more I believe Rochdale lost their identity a little bit. Maybe that was because of the market that they were shopping in on the budget that they had, that, you're not getting peak age players, you're not getting players on the rise, you're probably getting older campaigners and players that for some reason have lost their way in the game. So maybe that's got something to do with it. So, perhaps we shouldn't hold that too much against them. But I think as personalities, I think that, they've got a very good friendship. Both dreamers, both intuitives, both kind of sell themselves a vision and romantic in a sense of what they're trying to do. And both bounce off each other in that regard really well and get along really well. It's a good number of years now since they worked together. Going back to when Flitcroft took over from Hill at Barnsley, he managed to keep the job as caretaker after Hill was sacked, and then they kind of went their separate ways. Flitcroft went to Bury, while Hill returned to Rochdale, and then they were rivals, Rochdale-Bury rivalry. And there's a certain irony in the sense as well that, Bolton, the two crisis clubs this season, Bolton and Bury, that Flitcroft was the manager that probably did most of the money at Bury, which is not to attach any blame to Flitcroft. The club was terribly run, and like I say, he's a dreamer. He doesn't necessarily deal so much in concrete realities. He was given funds to play with and just bought the vision and saw the vision of what he could do, and probably overspent quite a lot at Bury. You think back to team coaches costing £500,000 and paying the rent to train at Manchester City's old training ground at Carrington after they moved their facilities. And now Flitcroft finds himself in a position where he's mopping up the mess of a club that's overspent and trying to rebuild a club from the bottom up. But like I say, two dreamers, the way they got together, that was that in the very, very beginning of Hill's managerial career, he persuaded Flitcroft to come out of his own family business and become an assistant manager and a coach, by essentially selling him the vision. Imagine me at Wembley on the touchline and you're not there alongside me. That's the way that you sell a dream to a mate, and this is very much where they're at now with Bolton. They are going to try and there'll be no limits in their minds of what they can achieve at the club. They go straight into a relegation battle. I think Hill's framing it very well, not just wanting the fans to turn up and enjoy the game by game experience. Let's not see this as a relegation battle that we're in. Let's just enjoy the fact that we've still got a football club. Let's just try and enjoy the football that we're going to try and produce, and let's see where it takes us. And if they get relegated, it's the perfect managerial team to bounce back next season. You'd imagine that they would have more clout than any other club at that level next season. So, there's a lot up in the air. I'm not really going to make any predictions about how it will transpire this season, because there is a lot of uncertainty about the fitness of the players that they've signed, about Hill and Flitcroft working with the personnel that they've brought in. But I just think that as a partnership, I think they're stronger together. I do believe that they will be stronger together. They are different personality types. I'm not entirely sure. I do know that. I do believe that Hill uses introverted intuition and Flitcroft uses extroverted intuition, which basically makes them different personality types and suggests that they can bounce off each other quite well. And I do think they're stronger together as a partnership than as individuals, and it will be interesting to see what develops at Bolton. But clearly there's an element of romance to this, and I do, it does feel like this was always destined that these two Bolton lads would eventually manage Bolton. Just the way it's actually transpired, a few years down the line from when it seemed most likely, is just the irony of football. That they're all kind of down on the luck a little bit, but this is the resurgence now, the resurgence for Bolton, and potentially the resurgence for Hill and Flitcroft too.